Welcome to the Responsible Parent Podcast, where overwhelmed families curious about naturally regulating their nervous system can find answers. I'm your host, Caylie, and in each episode, I'll cover a topic you've been wanting to understand more about and serve as a reminder for you that everything is cyclical and connected. Today, we have a private practice therapist who, in the last decade, has provided direct mental health care to patients in an inpatient behavioral setting, provided trauma-focused therapy, is now moving into integrating nature therapy, and perhaps her most impactful work is mom to 3 amazing kids and my dear friend, Erin Batenburg. Welcome,
Hello.
Erin.
Hi.
I'm so happy to have you on today. This has been exciting for me because I've been wanting to ask you about your journey back. To me, it feels like it's like your journey back to like nature again, which it isn't
Mhm.
necessarily the case because you've always loved nature and loved
Mm.
being outside. It's like an integral part of who you are. But this fall, when you told me you were going to go to, was it a retreat on the East Coast?
Yeah, training retreat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some training to be able to understand more about nature therapy, I was excited
Mhm.
because I got flashbacks to when we first met and we first bonded over painting our half naked bodies with peace signs and hugging trees. And then we both just went into this super westernized world. You know, I went
Mhm.
into very materialistic fashion design and you went into super regimented, the world of healthcare and
Mhm.
therapy. And so I feel like we're both coming back around in similar timing. And I just got really geeked
Mhm.
out and I thought, hey, this would be such a good time to save some of my questions even and ask you them here so that I remember them because my memory
Sure.
sucks in general. But
Perfect.
yes. So tell me a bit about your journey to obtaining and working with your master's in counseling, focusing
Mhm.
on international peace and conflict resolution, and what along that path ignited your interest to dig into nature therapy.
Ooh.
Mm, just your whole path.
Yeah, my whole sum it up as quickly as possible. So college, got my bachelor's in psychology and biology. So I've always been really interested in like the natural world in general and like life science. Hated like physics and chemistry, but big fan of like biology. Took a couple of like aquatic biology, zoology, all of that in college, but ultimately decided graduate school wise that I was going to go the psychology route. And so took a year off and just tried to find a program that I felt like fit. And then I ended up stumbling upon this really cool dual master's program where I could get 2 masters in 3 years, one of which in counseling psychology, which obviously just felt like the next right step with a psychology degree. And then the second master's, was in international peace and conflict resolution. So I just felt like it married well my desire to do counseling and like clinical work, but also have this piece of the broader. I also did like a decent amount of traveling in college and got really interested in just like the world in a way that you do when you go to college and meet people from different backgrounds and things like that. So I just wanted to marry my interest in psychology and social justice and felt like that would be a good way to do it. And also figured I'd get to travel more, which I did. So that was cool too. So I ended up doing that dual master's program, and that was in Philadelphia, and then moving back to West Michigan, where options for working in international peace and conflict resolution are extremely limited. But did my first job out of graduate school was at a YWCA, where I got to focus on really what was the perfect mirroring like I wanted. And I was doing clinical work, I was a therapist, but seeing specifically people with backgrounds with domestic violence, human trafficking, and sexual assault. So I got to do the clinical piece where I was treating people for PTSD and things like that, but I also got to be on this working with this organization doing kind of the broader spectrum. Like we did work in the community to educate. And this was also when like the Me Too movement was happening. So it was perfect. Like I got to do a lot of education in the community around sexual assault and human trafficking and things like that. So it really was a good marrying of what I had wanted. I wanted to do the broader social justice work, but at my core, I'm like, I want to do the one-on-one therapy too.
Yeah.
So that was my first job out of grad school. And then 2021, right?
No big deal.
Yes.
Most people's jobs right out of grad school are like McDonald's or something, and you're just
Right.
helping save a community, like
Yeah.
one small sector
Shame
at a
this
time.
thing. But it's nonprofit. So
Just flip your cape to the back. It's fine.
Mhm. Yeah. this nonprofit, which I feel like is a lot of when you're in like the social sciences and the social, that kind of industry is a lot of people's, you started either like the community level or uh, nonprofit, which is where I was at. So I did that for 4 years. And then, yeah, like you mentioned, I had 3 kids and the whole 5 days a week, 9 to 5 was killing me. So that's when I looked into doing private practice because I am my own boss and I set my own hours and it's lovely and I have a lot more freedom. But yes, so then where I ended up looking at wanting to look into more nature-based stuff, a lot of reasons. Like you said, I went like the model that we follow of mental health care in this country specifically is very much Western medical model of you have an issue, you have something wrong with your brain, you have depression, you have anxiety, you have PTSD, blah, 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 blah. We have this giant book that we look through. We say you have this symptom and that symptom. And so you have this. And you have a diagnosis, which now needs to be treated with medication, with therapy, with X, Y, and Z. And all of those things are great. And like they need to be part of the picture. But there's just such little talk about time outside and exercise and diet. I feel like that's mental health, but that's physical health too. That's the
Sure.
medical community. Um, because mental health is based so much out of the medical community, I feel like it's medication and it's therapy and that's it. And if those two things don't work for you, sorry, it is what it is. Just, I think in having kids and seeing how much more regulated they seem and how much better they sleep and all of that stuff when they are outside moving their bodies and getting sunlight and eating the right things for the most part. It was just like, you know what? We have to preach this more. We have to get people outside more. It's just so integral for regulating your nervous system and just being a better rounded person. So yeah, I just took to Google and I was like, all right, I want to do this more officially than just, hey, client, let's go for a walk outside. Like
Right.
what are other ways I can like make clinical therapy outside, essentially. So yeah, just took to Google and found this really reputable place. It's called the Center for Nature Informed Therapy. And they're out of, I can't think of the name of the town, but it's just outside of Baltimore in Maryland. But they've been around, they're relatively new. Everybody who's doing this kind of work is relatively new. But so yeah, just found them and saw that they do 2 trainings a year. And I was like, yep, going.
Yeah.
That's how I ended up doing that. I'm slowly integrating it. I did the training in November. So just weather-wise, that's not a great time to try to encourage people to get outside, even though we are having a ridiculously mild winter. So I'm slowly integrating it. I'm still technically in training. I have to do 4 months with them of meeting, doing consultation with them, where I can officially get my title of nature-informed therapist. So it's still a work in progress, but I'm hoping by March-ish to be almost maybe even transitioning out of the office at least 1 to 2 full days a week, doing it totally outside. So that's my goal.
I love that. That's so exciting. And thank you for sharing that, all of that, number
Yeah,
one. And I got a couple of nuggets out of that. So, number one,
sure.
one of the things that you said is we have to get people outside more. And I'm wondering if in some of your therapy sessions, as you're talking to people, is
Mhm.
there ever self talk in your head where you're like, and you spend all day in front of a computer and then go home inside and don't touch your feet to the grass
Eh,
and then was there some sort of I just am envisioning you seeing these patterns and then having your analytical brain come in and be like, I need to find out the actual science behind this because I know getting outside is good for them. So I can connect the dots and say, hey, I'm not just recommending this because it's a general practice. I'm recommending it because
sure.
it's backed by some sort of clinical studies.
100%. It's one of those, like you said, like us having just it feels so natural to us to want to be outside and like to know how good it is for us. There are some people who like walk to and from places outside, like from their car to their office and
Right.
from car to inside. Even in the nice months, like we get the okay, winter people don't like to be outside, but even like on a beautiful day, they're like, yeah, I just don't. It's not my thing. I don't like
Right.
to be outside. Not my thing.
Yeah.
Not a nature person.
Yeah.
Just like how you're literally made of nature.
Nature.
What is
Yeah.
it? Like you can't not be. But so yeah, there's off many times, especially with depression. I feel like depression is a huge one where and it comes up like probably my intakes of people, if not for a session, where I'm like, how much do you get outside? How much
Right.
exercise? Let's talk exercise, diet, sleep. Let's
Yeah.
talk those. What are those like? And more often than not, it's not at all. Like
Right.
exercise and the outside part are like minimal. And so, yeah, and some of this research that we went over in this training, they said for optimal health and for like nervous system regulation, it's only 120 minutes a week
Wow.
that is needed to like help with cortisol levels, to help with depression, anxiety. That's 17 minutes a day.
Wow.
So
Oh,
it's
that's my favorite.
literally only 17 minutes a day it takes to like for all of these natural just sun and earth and all of these great things we get from and sensory unload. And but just to some people, the thought of spending 17 minutes a day outside is that's way too much. Way too much.
Wow. And then on the opposite spectrum, like when I was feeling depressed, the last thing I remember, it was like, was it almost 2 years ago now? I had pretty severe depression for the first time in my life. And I was just going through it. And what I
Mhm.
craved more than anything was like merging with the mud. I was like, I just want to go outside and be naked
Mhm.
and then let a lot of rain fall on me and then become mud and like, feel worms. It was the weirdest craving to have, but I was like, I need that. That's what I need. And I remember telling select few people, my significant other and my mom, and they're like, oh my gosh, like that sounds like that's terrible. And
Mhm.
I'm like, no, it'd be
Mhm.
terrible if I wanted to like cut my entire emotional body off and just numb with alcohol or drugs or social media
Mhm.
or whatever. And I was like, but actually, this is what I need. This will make me healthier. And it did.
Mhm.
But if you don't grow up a weird hippie or grow up in the country, that isn't something that you necessarily have ever done. And so you wouldn't think
Sure.
that could be something that could be helpful for you.
Mhm.
No. But
Mhm.
oh, it's so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Even from what I really enjoyed about this training is I've got pretty big and just, I don't know, since grad school into like evolutionary psychology and all of the ologies. I just love to think about centuries ago, the way that we lived versus the way that we do now and like how our brains just really haven't caught up since the industrial revolution. If you look at the timeline of Homo sapiens emerging onto the scene of life, it's only like 10% of our history as a species has been spent inside. So when you think about how slow evolution is, how many centuries it takes for us to evolve to look the way that we do and to work the way that we do, only 10% of that time have we spent. I think it's 93% of our time we spend inside. So when you think about how slow evolution is and how just insanely fast the world changed after industrial revolution, like our brains and our bodies are still physiologically living outside. We still are at our optimal capacity to live outside, not to spend 93% of our day
Right.
on screen. So literally our evolution has not caught up to our technology. And we have seen huge spikes, especially since cell phones and the internet and social media and depression and anxiety and all of these things. And I can't help but draw parallels to like how much more time we spend inside sitting down looking at a screen and how it just went like that in 20 years. Our
Right.
lives changed in a way that they haven't in millions. So that, and it's just so interesting to look at the biology around it, the facts, and not just hippies being
Yeah.
like, oh, that's not, it's a good thing.
They just feel it.
Right.
Okay. So, number one, I have never heard that point of view before, and so that's really interesting. I never thought about that, like how slow evolution moves, how fast everything has been since the Industrial Revolution. Even just technology, over the past year, I feel has accelerated
Right.
exponentially.
Mhm.
That's accessible to us, the everyday
Mhm.
person.
Mhm.
Is just it's incredible. But I was talking to somebody about a month ago about how it's funny when we're trying to come up with solutions for problems that we have, and the solution is always something that's derived from nature. Excuse me.
Mhm.
So it's either you haven't had enough sunlight, you don't have enough vitamin D. Okay, you need to get a happy or a sad lamp or whatever you want to call them, right? And or you could just get your butt outside. Right. And then there's and you have to get this grounding mattress so that you can
No,
have
right,
the
yeah.
same and it's or you could just take your shoes off and go walk outside for 20 minutes or whatever. And
Right.
yes. And actually later today, I'm interviewing an herbalist, Jim McDonald, which I'm super excited about.
Mhm.
But he also talks about how herbs are made on a spectrum, right? And I think we
Mhm.
talked about this. Herbs can help both anxiety and depression, the same one.
Mhm.
And they have this, it's not like a one thing fits into this one little niche, right? And being outside in general, I feel like it's a general prescription of that would just be the most beneficial because it's all things in one. It's almost like an adaptogen. Whatever you need, your body gets, right? Or whatever
Sure.
your brain needs, like your brain gets. Like it's there, it's
Mhm.
available, it can grab it, it's magnetized towards it. So I think that's really interesting. Something else that you said is Western medicine, we tend to treat, especially like therapy patients per se, as in something's wrong with your brain.
Mhm.
And I find that really interesting to hear from you who's been practicing as a therapist because in my eyes I see that too and I see studying the very minimal amount of like neuroscience that I've studied to try to understand especially kids brains and how they're
Mhm.
developing and how they work and how it gets impacted when you're adult and how we like rewire and reprogram things. What I've
Yeah.
noticed is it's not that anything is ever wrong. I've been told my whole life that like people in my family have chemical imbalances, right? And that
Mhm.
that's something that they're born with, and that's something that
Mhm.
they'll never get rid of. Um, and to me, I find it fascinating because the more I dig into these things, just out of a personal passion project, I find that there's never innately anything wrong with you. There's never innately anything wrong with your brain. I think what we see, what you can see as chemical imbalances, aren't the problem, they're the result. They're pointing
Mhm.
towards a greater problem, right?
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
if you treat the root cause, which may not be physically, maybe it's
Sure.
emotionally, maybe it's something else that needs to be worked on. There's proof that emotions like hold structures and have memory
Mhm.
in your body, right? And yeah, I find that really interesting. Have you been learning anything about that? What you see clinically is a like result of something else in your studies?
Mhm. For sure. It's what I feel like I always am railing against with, like, just the whole, like, mental health community, but then it's also it has leaked into just popular culture and, like, TikTok and everything, and now the way that we spread information and all of that now. I feel like one of the first things I have to work with clients on is that it's never just one thing. Like,
Yeah.
they always wanna come in and be like, "I just gotta figure out what's wrong with you." It's never just one thing. Even if you That's why people get so upset when, like, anxieties and antidepressants don't work. I'm just like, because that's never just one thing. It's never just your neurotransmitters not work. You're not working enough. It's never just not having enough norepinephrine, dopamine, blah, 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 blah. It's environmental, it's biological, it's all of it. And we have to look at all of it. And I'm not to say like, I'm not like, oh, don't ever take antidepressants and anxieties. There are therapists out there who say that. I'm not one of them. I feel like they have a place and sometimes they can take the edge off just enough so that you can get out of bed to do the other work. They have their place, but we become so dependent on them that we don't look at the bigger pictures. We don't look at the why don't you have enough serotonin? Why
Mhm,
don't you have enough norepinephrine?
mm,
So yes, all of the things like we were talking about, the getting outside, the diet, the exercise, the community. What is your community? What does your support system look like? For a lot of people, it's non-existent. I swear 95% of my clients at some point in sessions will be like, I just want to figure out what's wrong with me, or I want to figure out what it is. And I'm just like, probably not going to happen, or at least not in the way that you think
you
it's
can
going
chip
to. Like,
away, yeah.
right, we are very complex animals living in a very complex world, and we've done it to ourselves. So we have to figure out how to live as adjusted, as chilled out as we possibly can. So, yes, and I feel like there's some movement in the mental health community now, especially to be like, we've gone too far with putting labels on everything, and that now everybody's just, oh, I must have this, and I must have this, and I must have this. And we're just so obsessed with this label. And I feel like that's not just mental health, that's everywhere to the extreme where we have to be like, okay, you can put a label on it, great, but that doesn't always provide you with the answers that you need. So,
Right, absolutely. Yeah, I even have found myself more recently attempting to label myself in a few things, and I'm
mm,
like, I follow a couple of really incredible autistic creators, and I'm like, "Am I
mhm,
autistic?" And I'm like, "I think I may be
mhm.
on the spectrum," and I think about it and I'm like and I went to my mom about it, and she goes, "Oh, that makes sense." And I was like, "Okay, alright, interesting." But then I'm like,
Right.
I don't feel the need to actually label that and try to treat it as if it's something that needs to be treated, though. If that is the case, it just means I'm just observing that my brain works differently than other people's and that my social skills I put social hierarchy differently. than maybe
Mhm.
I've been taught I should be putting it, right?
Sure.
And to me, that's how I am identifying as, "Oh, okay, I can see those links," but I don't feel like it's necessarily always something that needs to be treated. But like you said, when it does, when it's inhibiting your ability to live life
Sure.
joyfully or even at all, then
Mhm.
obviously there's a time and a place for treatment. You had mentioned community, and so I was pursuing the archives of psychiatric nursing, of course, and and I found that there were dozens of studies conducted on gardening or horticulture therapy, reducing feelings of isolation.
Mhm.
So I found that the most interesting because I too have experienced this being a weird only child who naturally
Mhm.
gravitated towards escaping isolation by being outside, right?
Right.
But to me, it's fascinating because it challenges our beliefs on what is living, right? If we're
Sure.
alone inside and we feel isolated, but it's measurable that when we're alone and conscious of nature outside, we feel fulfilled and not
Mhm.
isolated. Doesn't that in itself prove the intelligence of our interconnected ecosystem, right? And I just
Sure.
found that so mind blowing.
Mhm. Yeah, there's these, like, 2 you're bringing up, like, 2 concepts I remember learning from this training, and one of them was this idea of it's called species loneliness, and it's, like, because we've moved inside, and we are not living literally face to face, toe to toe with other animals unless we have domesticated pets, which is better, but not the same as, like, birds and squirrels and all of these things that we can watch and just be like, "Oh, you silly little thing," all day, that, like, we've created this loneliness for ourselves because we don't live in one with other animals, which is why having dogs and cats and all of that stuff, why we have emotional support animals and all of that
Yeah.
stuff, like, even yes, not doesn't have to be human connection, like any kind of connection point or animal is gonna improve feelings of loneliness. And then, yes, the other was like this concept of awe, like when you go somewhere, Yosemite, or you're standing at the base of the Grand Teton, like this, holy crap, how is this real? Kind
Yeah.
of that you don't ever get sitting inside generally. And that as the studies have shown that like these moments of awe, even if they're in your own backyard where the sunrise is beautiful or you have a fresh blanket of snow, whatever, these feelings of like interconnectedness as holy crap, whatever I've got going on in the moment is like totally in the back of my head now because I'm so amazed at like this beauty that I'm looking at. And it like automatically decreases stress, increases that like feeling of connectedness with other people who might be looking at the same sunset or the other animals that are looking at the
Right.
same sunset, whatever.
Or
So yes,
contributing to
there's
its
like
beauty.
tons of research that talks about how even if you're even just being outside alone as the only human in the area, like significantly decreases feelings of loneliness, increases feelings of connectivity with the natural world and all of humanity. Pretty amazing.
Wow. I love that. Go outside.
Mhm. Mhm. Doing and at the training, we did an all walk, which was a little
Oh,
corny, but whatever,
yeah.
where we just went out in the morning and we're like, "Oh," physically, we're like, "Oh, wow." Felt super cheesy, but
Oh,
what like, when you especially in, like, your own environment, okay, in the Midwest, we don't have mountains, we don't have you get this tendency to just be like, "Meh," but, like, it's relatively flat. Sure, we've got a lot of trees and stuff, but then, like, other people who would come here from places that don't look like that would have those awe moments, right? So, like,
right.
making the everyday mundane, like, purposely going out and being like, "Holy crap, look at these ants, like,
Right.
carrying twice their body weight by carrying this whole leaf." Just
Yeah.
those moments. Okay, it really is pretty amazing when you take a second.
Right. Absolutely. I had one of those moments at your house this weekend just because the sun was setting and I'm just up on your hill and I was like, "Oh, it's
Yeah,
so
in
beautiful."
February, what?
Yeah. What is this
Mhm.
bright ball? Okay, it looks like we're running a little low on time. I try to keep my
Mhm.
episodes under half an hour so busy parents
Mhm.
can get the best bang for their non-buck, but
No, it's
value
pretty
for their
tough.
time. Yep.
Mhm.
We do have a question from a listener.
Sure.
Laura asked, "What ways can we integrate more nature into our kids' lives during the cold months?"
Good question.
Okay.
Short of just making them do it. I yeah, I feel like
maybe what you said, what we were just talking about, maybe the answer even, like going out on an awe mission, right?
Yeah.
Finding things, because there's definitely things in the cold that are awe-inspiring, and then that
Sure.
doesn't only help you physically, it's like a mental and physical package.
Mhm. Mhm. Sure, and I just feel like making it a priority with
Yeah,
kids, like, just setting it as part of your this is alright, outside time, doesn't matter the weather, even if it
yeah,
is dangerously cold, obviously not, but
yeah.
we're having warmer winters, and we'll probably continue to have warmer winters, so feel like it's more our excuse than it's dangerous to have kids out in this weather, like, it's 40 degrees, they'll be fine. Just,
Yeah,
yeah, making it a priority of every day, like, we do it, even if it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, like,
yep,
going out and finding something cool in the yard or
yeah. Having it
whatever it is.
scheduled in, that's that your
Mhm,
17 minutes
mhm.
scheduled in. Yeah,
Exactly, 17 minutes a day, all it takes.
I love that.
Mhm.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much, Erin.
Yeah.
I love you, and I appreciate
Mhm.
you. I feel like we could talk about this stuff forever, and maybe after this episode airs, if there are any listeners who have, like, additional questions, I can have you back on to talk about other
Mhm.
things more in depth. But, yeah, we chatted about a lot. We chatted about your background, about you moving into nature therapy and why, and we
Mhm.
chatted about how, um Western medicine has its place, but we definitely are learning more and more about, I guess, just more, what you wouldn't necessarily call it Eastern medicine, just more information, maybe, to help aid
Mhm.
Western medicine.
Mhm. Sure. The concept that they used in this training I went to, they called it human rewilding.
Ah,
So that's
yeah,
whole I've been yes,
rewilding.
making humans more wild again.
I
Mhm.
love that. Catching us back up with our evolutionary path. Like, we're not
Mhm.
robots yet. We're still
Right. Right.
animals of nature. Our atoms are still made of the same thing the earth is, right? So we have
Right.
to
Mhm. Mhm.
we do. Okay. Wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast, I invite you to kindly rate, subscribe, and leave a review to encourage the work we're doing and share. Please share this with any mamas or anybody who would be interested in knowing this information about how going outside can help regulate your nervous system. And Erin, is there any way that we can connect our listeners with you, maybe in a few months when you're up and running your nature therapy?
Mhm. Yeah, I would email is just if you have any questions about any of this kind of stuff, email is great. My profile, if that you're interested more, is on it's called psychologytoday.com. You just put in my name and there I am. It's going to be tailored, it's not yet, but specifically to nature therapy soon. So that's where you can find
Um,
therapy program. So,
All right. Thank you so much, Erin, and
oops.
have a good rest of your day. And I am so grateful that we are connected.
Thank you.